Player value of your Dynasty Startup team is always of paramount importance, and deciding how you might construct your roster is something that's always good to have a little bit of an idea of as you go into your Dynasty Startup drafts. So what better way than to play around with some construction than a good old mock draft? And I'm joined by Pete McManus of the JMD Podcast team to have a little bit of a mock draft today. Are you ready to delve straight into our startup draft, Pete?
I am indeed. Thanks for the invite. Let's go for it.
So we'll get stuck straight in then. We have decided that we're going to go for a standard 12-team draft. I know the JMD boys are trying to normalise that 8-team draft, but we're going to stick with the old traditional 12 for now. And Pete had allocated himself to the 10, so I thought I will go for the 3, just to bookend it nicely. We're going for 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 2 flex, and then we're just going to give you 3 of the bench spots before we then do some later round picks as well. And we may as well get stuck straight in. And I don't think there's going to be any surprise to who goes off the board first. There is not. Jamar Chase straight off at 1. Jefferson then off at 2. I think the only thing that divides the 2 of those is we've got some certainty around quarterback with Chase, and it's still up at the air for Jefferson. But you could make a case for either of those at the 1, couldn't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think Chase is always going to edge it coming off that season he's just had. And obviously with Burrow as quarterback for the next 5 to 10 years, I think he's always going to have the edge for me.
I have played around with a few different ways to build my roster in Dynasty. And I think at this point, there's one running back I'll be considering, and that's Jahmyr Gibbs. But I just like the way my rosters come together a bit better when I go for getting my wide receivers, an elite young wide receivers set. So for me, I'm torn between Malik Neighbours and CD Lamb at the 3. So I'm going to go purely on age, and what we saw last year was so phenomenal. I'm going to pick up Malik Neighbours. The 3, a little bit of uncertainty we know around QB, but what a player last season. And surely he's only going to kick on to even bigger things this year. We've then got 2 running backs off the board, Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs. Who would you go for out of those 2? Who would be your preference if you were taking a running back early out of Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs?
It's a conversation we've had on the pod actually not so long ago, and I asked the lads, and they both said, well, they split the decision in Bijan and Gibbs, and then both started thinking about it. So they said it instantly, and then both started second guessing themselves. I think for me, it's Bijan slightly, and the only reason I say that is I just don't think the competition in that 2-headed monster that the Lions have got works last year because they were one of the best offenses in football. I just don't know whether moving forward that they're going to be as efficient, and therefore does Montgomery take less touches, or does that just affect both of them? Whereas with the Falcons, I think Bijan's the number 1, and he's going to get his 25 touches a game on average, and I think he's just a little bit more secure for me.
Yeah, and I don't think there is a right answer, really, is there? You can make a valid case either way. If I had to put which one was more likely to be the number 1 player of all fantasy this year, following Saquon's footsteps, I think I'd probably go Bijan, though, from what we've seen so far. But yeah, either could do it. Then CD Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Brock Bowers goes at the 108. That's probably about where he's going usually. Still feels a little bit early for me, maybe. I'm not sure. Saquon Barkley at 109, and then you are up in the 110. Who are we thinking here?
Do you know what? I picked the 10 spot because I'm very well known for wanting to start all my drafts with a top wide receiver. So it was a little bit more of a challenge in a sort of 1 QB draft that I knew I wasn't going to get one of the top 3 or 4 or 5 in this instance, just to sort of see how it sort of panned out from there. But I am still going to go wide receiver, and I'm going to follow you with a second-year wide receiver who ripped it up last year, and I'm going to go Brian Thomas.
Yeah, can't argue with that whatsoever. I mean, I did argue with that a lot last preseason. I just didn't really see what everyone else was seeing in preseason with Brian Thomas. I wondered how much of it was the fact that Malik Neighbours obviously was attracting a lot of the coverage, but I mean, phenomenal season. Yes, a little bit of competition this year as well, obviously. But
Yeah.
from what we've seen year one, we look like we are set for stellar numbers year on year on year from Brian Thomas Jr., don't we?
Yes, definitely. And I think the impressive thing with Thomas, very similar to Neighbours last year, and you could have made the same argument about Justin Jefferson, is that they're doing it no matter who the quarterback is. So you see so many time after time we talk about wide receivers, and is this going to be the year now they've got X at quarterback? But it just for those three, or at least for Jefferson over the years, and for those two last year, it didn't matter who was throwing the ball. They found a way to go and find it. And I mean, I've got Trevor Lawrence on far too many fantasy teams to have given up on him at this point. I've still got a lot of hope that he will come good. Maybe not as good as everyone thought coming out of college, but I've got a lot of hope that he will eventually reach a sort of standard sort of top 12 NFL QB level. And I think if he does that, his potential is as big as it gets.
After that, Ashton Genty went off towards our first rookie. Once again, seems about the sort of place we're seeing him go there. Josh Allen, the first QB one. I still can't in a single QB Dynasty Startups take a quarterback in the first round. But once again, that's sort of where maybe the early you're going to see Josh Allen go.
I think it's a little bit too early for me. I have this habit of leaving quarterbacks, and it's something I need to get out of, because I think it's the one position when you're in preseason and you're doing drafts and stuff. I think it's easy to go, yeah, I can fill that position. But week to week, it's the one position in the season where if you've got someone like Josh Allen, it's lovely to just kind of go, yeah, I'll plug him in. I don't need to worry about that. And you can find running backs and you can find wide receivers, or you could argue that you can, but I think the end of the first round, start the second round is way too early for me. As good as he has been and as good as he is.
Achan went next, followed by Puka Nacua, and then you are up again at the 203. Would you have taken Allen if he was there at this stage? Will that still be too early for you? Would you still be looking elsewhere regardless?
I think for me, and it'd be interesting to see how far they fall, but there's 4 or 5, probably 4 quarterbacks that if I'm going to take an early one, I want one of those 4. And I think for me, they'd have to come back towards the back end of the third round. I think there's so much talent in terms of wide receivers and still at running back that I'm looking at here. I think I'd rather take a quarterback. I'd rather take a wide receiver here, which is what I'm really looking at, and then wait for a quarterback in the next round. And if the other 3 on the board that I'd like go, then I'll just pick one up late, as I usually do, and go back into that panic mode that I've just talked about once the season kicks off.
So who are you going to make your second player then?
Yeah, the choice for me here is making the same mistake I make in falling into Cardinals over and over, and teaming him with another second-year wide receiver, or taking the slightly safer option. And with this being Dynasty, I think I'll take the safer option and go with the number 1 for the Texans, and Nico Collins.
Yeah, I think although there are the kind of question marks around who's going to fill in behind him, there's not a question about anyone usurping him as the number 1 target, is there? And I still think that CJ Stroud down season is a little bit overblown. I think we're comparing just how good that first season was. He was still efficient last season. Nico Collins still put up great numbers. We're going to talk about pass catching options in Houston as well at other points during this draft, I'm sure. But yeah, Nico Collins feels a really solid pick there. And to start off your draft with Thomas and Nico, that's not a bad little start to have you locked in wide receivers week in, week out, is it?
No. Everybody who knows me will tell you that's very me. Just a couple of wide receivers. I think the other thing with Stroud is, I think a lot gets talked about his fantasy numbers and his fantasy potential, and I get that he doesn't rush. That first season maybe the first season was a bit higher than expected. Last season was a little bit lower than what you could expect. But he's still a top quarterback, and he's still gonna do enough to give you good numbers for the wide receiver and some of the other picks around him, if he doesn't necessarily do it as a quarterback in a 1 quarterback league.
Following on from that, my QB1, Lamar Jackson, went off the board. Lad McConkey, I love Lad McConkey. I think I'd have gone for Drake London comfortably ahead of him there, though. But say Lad McConkey is still a great fantasy target. Daniel's off next. We have 3 QBs gone. Then Drake London, Marvin Harrison, and Bucky Irving. Amazing to see how high he's going, and fairly so in startup drafts this year, considering how far he dropped in our rookie drafts last year. I'm faced them with there's a couple of options at each position that I'd quite happily go. There's a part of me would like to take the gamble on Amari Hampton at this point. If I was going to take a running back, though, I'm probably going to go a little bit later with that when it's not someone who is someone with proven NFL pedigree yet. JSN is in the mix as well. Brown is in the mix for possible wide receiver also, but I'm going to go for a player. Once again, that idea of locking a player in and not having to think about it is what I like at tight end. And I think for that reason, I'm going to take Trey McBride with my second pick, just so I can forget about it. I don't have to think about tight end till much, much later in the draft. To be honest, I could not think about it if I needed someone for that bye week. I can pick someone up there. So, yeah, Trey McBride is my pick there. Is there any? Would you usually go for a tight end early, or do you apply the same as quarterback?
I would go for him if he's Trey McBride. So I got a lot of love for Trey McBride. I've got him in many teams, and I spend the rest of my time trying to bring him into all the other teams. So I think I might be about as high on him as it can possibly get. So I think that's a great pick. I think at the end of the second round, I think it's that, like you say, there's only 3 tight ends that I'd be comfortable plugging in and just forgetting about for the season. There's those 2, and then there's George Kittle. And obviously with Kittle's age and this being Dynasty, he's going to go a little bit later. But yeah, it's similar to the quarterback thing. It's nice to be able to just plug and play and not have to worry about them or think about that position on a week-to-week basis. So yeah, I would have done exactly the same in that position.
And the 3 players that follow are players that say, well, 3 that I mentioned, they're also in the mix, but they don't have they have a question mark, whereas Trey McBride doesn't for me. AJ Brown, we're getting on a little bit. Amari Hampton I'm as confident as I can be, but we haven't seen it yet. So there's that little bit of a question mark. JSN, I mean, Sam Darnold is as question mark as a player gets for me. But Jalen Hurts is the last quarterback I think I would have had any consideration of in the top 3 rounds as well. But also when I've picked a tight end early, if a tight end or a quarterback early, I'm then going to push the other position a little bit further down the road, unless someone massively drops for me. So at this point, I think I'm also going to want to keep stocking up at wide receiver as I've gone for tight end, because I like to have 2. What I see is leave them in your line at week in, week out. Don't think about it, wide receivers. And T. Higgins would have been a straight up pick for me here. But I think that Garrett Wilson is going at a value in startups at the moment. I really, really do. Yes, I get it. There's those question marks again around quarterback play. But Garrett Wilson, I think, what was he wide receiver 9 last year? Yeah, he's now going off board far, far later. He's still got age on his side. And once again, I just prefer him to the running backs that are likely to go off at this stage as well. And we added a running back run. Kyren Williams, Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, Travis Hunter. I don't know at what point I'm going to pick Travis Hunter in a startup. What are your thoughts?
Travis Hunter feels a bit to me like one of those players that's never going to fall far enough for me to actually draft him. I think someone else is always going to take the chance before I do. And I just, unless you've got some weird scoring mode, which I believe we've got in Scott Fish this year, where they're giving defensive points or points for defensive play. I just don't see how until you've seen it on the field, it's such a gamble at the middle of the 3rd round of a dynasty team that you've got to sit with for the next 4 or 5 years. That's a big gamble at that position.
I would 100% take Ted McMillan over Travis Hunter personally. I think we say about that point, if Travis Hunter was still on the board at my next pick at the 411, I'd think about it definitely at that stage, but I don't think he's ever going to get there in startup. Like you say, I don't think I'm ever going to have to think about, shall I draft Travis Hunter? Because there's people far higher on him than me. Team 9 is building a magnificent win this season with all of the rushing yards, Saquon, Lamar Jackson, and then CMC with their third pick. So that leaves you with 2 wide receivers on the board already and your third pick to make.
Which means I'm in a choice of not a massive fan of the running backs right at the top of the list in terms of how Sleeper's got it. Josh Jacobs, I've never been a fan. Don't know what it is. I know he had a great year last year. Henderson's, I think, is going to be very good, but I think he's a bit of a gamble. Joe Burrow is tempting. He would be my 5th quarterback, and this would kind of be about the position to take him. In an ideal world, I'd like to take Joe Burrow and then Higgins come back around, but that's 4 spots, and I don't think he's going to make it. Or then we're obviously at wide receiver. I've talked about tight end. I'm not taking a tight end until a bit later now with those the two main guys off the board. So I think because I've got the wide receivers, I will take Joe Burrow. And if Higgins makes it back, I can take Higgins. And if he doesn't, that was bound to happen as soon as I said it. If he doesn't, I won't, which means I'll be looking at running back, which is difficult. Now I've got a dilemma.
Chase Brown
James
sat
Cook.
there just waiting to join Joey B.
Yeah, which might be the way to go. James Cook was the other one that I was hoping, so they were bound to be the 2 picks before me, weren't they? So I thought one of them will make it back, which I think is like the number one rule in fantasy football drafts. Is like if there's 2 picks in front of you, make sure you've got 3 players you like. Otherwise, you're going to be flapping it. You're going to be flapping a little bit. So I will go running back, and I've gone a little bit for I've got the future in terms of Brian Thomas. Burrow's going to be there for a while. Whenever I'm trying to build dynasty teams, I kind of I want to try and find the balance. I think a lot of people go into dynasty and they're just, if you're over the age of 25, they're not interested in you. They just don't like, it's like, I need these players for the next 5 or 6 years. And I think there needs to be a little bit of balance. So I do want to build for the future, but I also want to have a run at the championship this year. And I think with that in mind, I will take Derrick Henry. Because I think he's going to have another big year.
Yeah, you've got 2 solid years there of it's lockdown as running back 1 in Baltimore, bar any freakish injury, but he just seems to be freakishly repellent to injuries that keep him out of the game. Fantastic video I saw on online earlier where he has a deal with Adam Sandler that if he gets over 2,000 rushing yards this year, he will be in an Adam Sandler film. That's going to be a lovely talking point at the end of the season. That's going to be spoken about far too much come December. But the
other thing with Henry is I think everybody knows he had a good year last year, but it's almost as if it's been not bigged up. It's been played down a little bit because of the year that Barkley had. And I think you take Barkley out of the league, we'd all be talking about what an amazing year Derrick Henry had. And he was only just short of 2,000 yards last year with the touchdowns that came with it. I just think I think he's still a little bit, because of what Barkley did, I think he's a little bit underrated this year. When you look at where I know Barkley's a little bit younger, but when you look at where Barkley's gone at the 109 and Henry's fallen all the way to the 4th round, I think there's a little bit of a value there.
Yeah, no, really, really agree with that. And he's, like I say, if you're wanting to get yourself a championship contention year 1, is the exact sort of pick that you want to be making. Next up, then, the first wide receiver for Team 9, we have Devonta Smith, Chase Brown, then Josh Jacobs. We're starting to get to the realm where there are those question marks forming around your players. So Rashee Rice and Rome Odunze, they could be amazing values come this time next year. They could be car crash picks. I don't think with either of them, they're going to be round 4 value next year. I think they will either far exceed that or drop massively. Next is the running back that, if on the board, I would have definitely been considering at this point, but Team 4 are taking all of the running backs with their setup. So Quinshon Judkins is gone. So at this point where I'm looking at players that I've got available, so my next best available, I've got Patrick Mahomes, but that's not what I want to do in the fourth round, regardless of where I've got him ranked in my lineups. Xavier Worthy, Zay Flowers, DJ Moore are all there on the board as well. There's loads of different metrics you can put into play and lots of different analytics you can look at when you are building your roster and why you are building your roster. Sometimes it's just quite nice to pick a player that you want to have on your roster and watch do well. So that is why I'm going to take Zay Flowers at this point, because I absolutely love him. Obviously, that Ravens bias is there for all to see. And I just want Zay Flowers on my roster. And I think that he's a player that I don't think are you ever going to get consistent numbers week in, week out? Absolutely not. But you are going to get a few of those spike weeks. He's going to be playing for a contract this year as well, which is in the mix. He's lots to talk about him hiring an agent who's known for getting those big contracts as well. And he's my third wide receiver. So I've got Zay Flowers at flex. I'm really, really happy with that as a start of my build. Kenneth Walker, Terry McLaurin. Next, RJ Harvey, who is rising and rising and rising through the course of the offseason. And then the second wide receiver for Kansas City Chiefs, Xavier Worthy, off next. I wonder how much Rice and Worthy are going to be similar to when we're talking about Moore, Odunze last year, and can we have that pride of getting that many, of getting the targets? Are they both going to be fantasy relevant to a useful degree there? Possibly not. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, they are not.
Yeah, I think it was interesting with those two Chiefs that they both had a bit. Rice had a really good start to the season last year when Worthy was working his way into the offense, and then Worthy finished it really well when Rice was out injured. So it's like we've never really seen them both on the field at the same time in their, with their strengths. I mean, you mentioned Team 4. Team 4 is making me feel really nervous at this point. If they take another running back after this pick, I think you can write that team off. But it'd be interesting to see what you do here. 3 wide receivers and a tight end. Is it time to look at quarterback? You mentioned Mahomes. Be interesting to hear your thoughts on Mahomes moving forward, because he's not had the best couple of years over the last couple of years.
He still feels like a quarterback that you draft and then you leave in your lineup and you forget about, but he doesn't give you numbers that mean you can forget about him.
No.
And I don't know. I think there are players I would be just as happy. I mean, to be honest, where I'm looking now, I've got a band of about 3 quarterbacks. So when I'm looking at my ranks, I've got my Herbert, Stroud, Drake, May window is where I think I'm going to probably wait for when I'm coming to quarterback. I feel now you've got Joey B. I can say that openly in the draft room.
Yeah.
So I'm looking, this is where I'm starting to look at how I'm building my team. And there is absolutely the case for just taking best player around who you need to start thinking a bit more, kind of going for depth and having a few dart throws with your dynasty build. But I hate having to scramble for 2 players at position, let alone rather than just 1 player. So I'd rather get 1 running back I feel reasonably confident I can leave in place. So I am working way down a little bit with my rank players. I've got a little body of wide receivers that are before this guy, but I don't think he's going to make it back to me. I'm going to be taking Caleb Johnson at this stage. He's a running back that I loved through the pre-draft process. I can't imagine Jalen Warren's going to give him too much to worry about when we get towards tail end of the season. Warren and Johnson's a sort of player that I think people will probably start to get a bit twitchy about having picked up as we're moving through October. But I reckon by the time we get to December, he will be staking a claim to he is the guy in the backfield in Pittsburgh. And that's certainly what I'm hoping with this build.
And that in a team that wants to run the ball with an offensive coordinator that wants to run the ball. So, and I mean, Jalen Warren I've always quite liked, but I think he had his chance last year when Najee wasn't playing brilliantly, and he couldn't keep him off the field. So it's like there's no reason to believe that Jalen Warren's any better than a second option. And I think you're right. I think with a lot of these rookies, you can't expect them to go out and have 20 touches from day one. But I think by the time you get to the end of the season when it matters, I think they'll have the majority of the backfield touches.
Well, as social media would have us believe, with the signing of Aaron Rodgers, the Steelers are going to win the Super Bowl now. So obviously, it'll be Super Bowl winning rookie Caleb Johnson soon. Before we move on, then, I want to have a quick mention of the TH Fantasy Football Bestball Bonanza 2025. At the time of recording, we've got a wrong graphic. At the time of recording, we have 40 spaces remaining. We are on our way to £2,000 raised so far this year, and gradually creep towards 6,500 raised all time as well. So if you're not signed up yet, head yourself down to the comments and click on the link there and get yourself signed up. The JMD boys have got a really good collaboration with the JTT Cup as well, haven't you, for some Dynasty leagues that you've got set up on Sleeper?
Yeah, we've extended our JMD and JTT Dynasty League to 5 divisions. We are more than willing to look at a 6th division if we get the interest. We're sort of trying to slowly build it because it's Dynasty rather than just kind of go, yeah, as many as possible. Only letting people. I've had people requesting second teams and things like that. I was like, we're just trying to keep everything to a manageable number. There's a lot of work that goes into it. But yeah, that yours is a great charity. I got my invite to the league earlier, so I will be clicking on that once I've finished this pod. We do obviously with the JTT and all of the other best balls competitions. There's a lot of good ones out there. We've got a good community in the UK that's really good to be a part of. And I love best ball season because it just allows you to draft without that fear of having to manage 48 teams during the season. But yeah, going back to us, we do a dynasty league that runs across the year. It's 8-team leagues. There's 5 of them at the moment, but if we get a few interested in the 6th division, we will open it up for 6th division for 2025. And if not, we'll look at that in 2026.
Yeah, so
thanks
definitely.
For your support, as always, with that as well.
No, and how many teams are there in each league?
8 teams in each league. We are normalizing 8-team leagues. It's funny you mentioned it at the beginning. I didn't want to interrupt you. I was in a 10-team Dynasty Startup the other day, and somebody pointed out to me, they were like, "I thought you only did 8-team leagues." I was like, "No, it's not that we only play in 8-team leagues. It's just we're trying to normalize the fact that 8-team leagues are acceptable." So a lot of what we do is based on 8-team leagues, and there's various reasons if you listen to the pod why we do that. But it's just a different challenge to doing a 12 or 10 or something like that. And it's funny watching the JMD league, the Dynasty League conversations go on. People who are used to playing in 12-team leagues suddenly feel like they've got these ultra teams once they're in 8 team, and then they look around and realize everybody else has got a super team too. So it just changes the way you look at it a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. The number of times I looked when I was going through waves, I just go like, "Well, I can't drop on this. My team is it?" And then, oh yeah, 8 teams. Yeah, you do keep checking yourself then. But yeah, definitely go and check that out if you want to head over. Firstly to YouTube, Jefferson My Drinks Fantasy Podcast, and then also follow the guys over on X at the JMD Pod. But you are back up with, well, you got 40 seconds now to make your 5th pack. We have jabbered on a little bit too long there.
That's all right. This is this is easy. We're getting into the territory where there's some wide receivers that I like here, and I really like DK Metcalf this year, but there's something about the Steelers. We don't have a lot of Steelers love on our podcast, so I feel like I can't do that. So I'm going to take the one who's actually at the top of the board in terms of sleeper and go with DJ Moore. I feel like for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been higher on DJ Moore than almost everybody that I draft with. So he falls to me a lot. But I just think he's an elite wide receiver. And I think there's a lot more competition for him there. But I'm hoping the offense will be a little bit better this year. And he's proven over the last few years he could comfortably be a top 10 wide receiver at the end of the year. And he's got a few years left in him. So that's an easy pick for me.
I think he was regarded as a little bit of a bust last year, but in his defense, he was being drafted far too high for fantasy last year. That seemed quite clear. Ed and I said in our preview show we thought he was going far too high. Late in the 5th seems exactly where that feels right, doesn't it? And he could absolutely exceed that. Going straight after him is Colston Loveland, so the rookie tight end in Chicago as well. Followed by Jameson Williams, DK Metcalf, who you'd mentioned, and then Mixon coming off as well. Where are you looking at? So you've got 3 wide receivers, running back, and a quarterback. what are you thinking with the players towards the top of your board now?
They're all wide receivers again, which is, I mean, this is where I would have considered Kittle if he had fallen. Loveland's a bit high for me. Obviously, he's gone too. And this is when you get into we're into the area of tight ends. I'm tempted by Warren because of my Colts fandom. So I feel like there should be an element of me leaning that way. But there is a wide receiver on the board who is not going to make it back to me. And yeah, I'd like to probably get 4 wide receivers from the first 6 picks in the format that we're playing, and he won't make it back to me. He's a little bit of a reach based on the board, and he's not had the greatest couple of years, but I just can't shake him and I can't give him up. And that's Jalen Waddle, and he's sort of one of the there's a couple of wide receivers, and he's one of the ones that I, for whatever reason, every single year I find another reason why he's going to be top 5 this year. And I'm doing it again. Talk of Jonnu Smith leaving, Tyreek Hill not being happy. I can see a path to him being a top 10 wide receiver at the end of the year, and I'm fully in on Jalen Waddle.
I think at the moment I see Jordan Addison and Jalen Waddle as pretty much the same player when it comes to fantasy value. But the only separator is I can see the end for Tyreek Hill very clearly. There isn't an end in sight for Jefferson. So, yeah, Waddle is a player that, had he managed to slip all the way down to me, I would have absolutely have taken. Off next, Warren, then Addison, Alvin Kamara, who, I mean, that's surely a 1-year pick for Kamara for Team 7 there. And then we're starting to get QBs filtering in more as we do round 6, 7. So Herbert, Nix, and then Hockenson. Team 4 are wide receiver phobic at this point. They've got 4 running backs, their quarterback and their tight end. So at this stage, as I said earlier, there are 3 quarterbacks that I would like to try to finish my draft with, so that I'm confident I've got a steady week in, week out play that I can forget about and not worry about too much. Herbert is off the board already, so that leaves me with Love and Stroud that I'll be happy with. So at this stage, I'm not going to pick one of those because Team 2 have already got Hurts. So Team 1, if they go quarterback, I should still be left with one. So it means I can have a look elsewhere. I'm not greatly excited by any of the running back options that are on the board at the moment. So I think I'm going to have to go for a wide receiver again. Top of my board is Jerry Jeudy. I don't think I can do that. So I'm going to go instead for another player I'm not 100% on, and that is Matthew Golden from Green Bay. I'm going to quickly also, while we're talking plugging, so I've just noticed my charge is about to run out, so I shall just lean around the screen for a moment.
Matthew Golden. Yeah, he's an while you're sorting out, he's an interesting one. Because the other wide receiver that I would love to have on my roster and have on, I think, every best ball, well, at least 80% of the best ball rosters I've done so far this year, is Jaden Reed. I think Jaden Reed's turning into my guy for 2025. I just completely, and I've just got this belief. I don't watch a lot of college football, and I've got no reason to believe that Golden isn't going to do it. I've just got this belief that they only picked him because the draft was in Green Bay and they wanted to make a splash. I don't actually believe that they're sold into Matthew Golden as a wide receiver, and I just think there's no guarantee he's going to be the guy. And I think Jaden Reed seems to be falling in every draft that I've done, and I just think he's shown that he's a quality wide receiver, and the rest of the talent around him isn't that good. So it will be interesting to see if Golden can come in and lead that room, because they really need an alpha. But my money is on Jaden Reed stepping up.
Yeah, I mean, as a rule, I don't want to touch a Green Bay Packers wide receiver at all, because it's such a money field. The other player that was on a little bit and is back here again is a player that I am very high, and I think is a bit Marmite at the minute in fantasy circles. That's Ricky Pearsall. I do genuinely see that he's got a route to being the wide receiver 1 in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Obviously, we didn't see a lot last year. Awful start to the season, getting shot. Not ideal the week before you're starting your elite sporting career.
Not the best prep.
He's got a hamstring injury at the moment. I think I'm not really bothered about hamstring injury at this stage of the off season. That doesn't greatly concern me. And he's sat there for me now as well as a possibility. I think there's a chance he gets back. I think it's possibly unlikely. So I'm then looking at my gamblers paid off with quarterback. Team one didn't take them, so I still have Jordan Love and CJ Stroud sat there. But between me and my next pick, there are two teams without quarterbacks. So I think I'm going to go at this stage for my quarterback. I'm going to go for Jordan Love. I'm really happy with that in the 7th round, to be honest. And the fact I've got a quarterback I can leave in and not worry about. I've got a tight end I can leave in and not worry about. I'm quite content with my wide receiver room so far. I'm just going to be dealing with faff at running back week in, week out at the moment with this roster so far. After that, Jerry Jeudy, Tracy Pacheco Scatterbo. Scatterbo is a player I'm really interested to see how he develops this season. He's a player I've tried to get lots of in rookie drafts so far. Caleb Williams went to teammate, so maybe I could have gambled and waited for Jordan Love or CJ Stroud to come back. And Caleb Williams could prove to be massive, massive value at that point if he kicks on with that improved O-line, even more receiving options. We could be talking about him very, very differently, couldn't we, this time next year?
Yeah, we could. He's another player. You mentioned it earlier about Odunze and Rice. It feels like he's not going to be going in the 7th round next year. He's either going to be nudged up 3 or 4 rounds or nudged down 3 or 4 rounds.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's the gamble with Dynasty. Is like pick your poison and see how it works out.
You're in a similar position to me with running backs. Are you thinking running back now, or are you thoroughly unenthused by what's there at the minute?
I was thinking running back until 4 went off the board in the 5 picks before it came to me. Scatterbo is somebody I would have liked. I think Connor is solid. Maybe a little bit too much like Henry in that I'm not sure whether there's 1 or 2 years left there, and then I'm going to have nothing at running back, which isn't necessarily a problem. It's 2 rookie drafts between then. That's not really how I play Dynasty. I don't tend to worry about my running back position too much. So there's a couple of running backs I like. I'm not in on Swift. I firmly believe the Bears wanted to draft a running back and just didn't have the opportunity where they really want everybody. When you look at the draft, 3 or 4 picks before they picked, a running back went off the board every time, and I just kept thinking that they weren't quite at the level where they wanted to take one. I mean, we talk about the coach having Swift in when he was at Detroit, and he didn't like him and let him go. So I'm not a massive fan of Swift. I do like Brian Robinson as a sort of plug and play. He's not going to light the world on fire, but he could give you solid numbers. So what I think I will do, and then I've already mentioned Jaden Reed, they would be the 2 that I would like. So I'm going to take Robinson now and hope that Reed makes it back around.
Oh, he does.
Which he did. Which is fine, because I think Devontae Adams is the only one out of those 3 that's gone. I mean, I'm not going to take Luther Burden when I've already got DJ Moore. I'm a firm believer in picking your man and sticking with him. Brandon Ayuk, I think, is a massive gamble. Maybe not so much a massive gamble now we're at the end of the 7th round. And I like Devontae Adams. I think if you're in a win now situation, that team, the team 12 is potentially very, very strong in 2025. So I think I like the Adams pick, and obviously you've already mentioned CJ Stroud. So you probably could have waited for Love another round, but I've already talked about it, so I won't waste any more time. I'm taking Jaden Reed because I think he will lead that Packers wide receiver room.
The moment I just start to think Ricky Pearsall may make it all the way back to me, and I could take a snap at this point. He's gone off the board. I'm a big believer in Ricky Pearsall. I do believe that 1st round draft capital, you've said, I think I can't imagine a single draft where I would ever consider taking Brandon Ayuk over Ricky Pearsall. Similar to other players we mentioned, I can't imagine a draft I'm ever going to lead with Brandon Ayuk because I'm just not as high on him as 30-40% of other people are. So he's always going to go to someone before me. Swift is an interesting pick. We've seen the talent. everything is on a plate for him currently in Chicago unless someone else arrives there. So could he kick on? Travis Etienne, I've not got a great deal to say about Travis. I've thoroughly switched off to him as a fantasy site now, and as a player I need to try to move on where I can in some of my leagues. I'm hoping he at least starts the season well so I can sell him at that point. Team 6 is gambling on. This is definitely the Carpets breakout season. See if we're saying that again and again this time next year. Dalton Kincaid, that shows where you're at with tight end, doesn't it, at this point? So I can't imagine you were thinking about tight end when they were the next two best available on the board.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it. I mentioned it earlier in terms of once you get past the 3 for me, and I know Laporta went slightly higher. I've never been high on Laporta. I know he had a great rookie year, but there was so many touchdowns in that year. I just didn't think it was repeatable. And I think that came to fruition last year. I think there's no doubt he's a good player. I just think he's always going a little bit higher than I want to be taking a tight end who's I can't trust to give me at least a baseline every week. And then you're into the same. Then there's not one, where it goes Hockenson, Warren, Kincaid, Pitts. You could mix them in with a 2 or 3 that are still off the board that I'd be interested in. And I think obviously Team 1 and Team 2 haven't got a tight end, so I'm hoping it gets around the corner without them taking the one I've got in mind. But then I'm pretty much home and dry because I'll either take one with my next pick or on the way back in the 10th.
I'm starting to get a little bit twitchy about who my second running back is going to be. So Trey Harris, I'd forgotten about it. If Trey Harris was still on the board, I think I'd have taken Harris at this point. I'm worried about it a little bit later. So there is a running back that I have in mind, but I know for a fact he will still be there when he comes back around. I may even wait a little bit longer. So I'm looking at some gambles to take here. And I think at this point, I'm going to go for Jaden Higgins. I'm going to go for another wide receiver at this stage. So I've now fully stocked up on wide receiver. I'm going to have Jaden Higgins starting on my bench with our 2 wide receiver, 2 flex spots. And I'm quite comfortable having him there because he could be a player that by the end of the season is locked and loaded every week for me. I think if he sits nicely behind Nico, he could have really good value week in, week out for you. However, I think this is going to be my first pick that's going to be a bit of a curveball. So just before I get to mine, Mark Andrews went off the board. I have Mark Andrews for Dynasty Startups exactly equal with Isaiah Likely at the moment because one of them will not be there next year. That feels guaranteed. Mark Andrews is, if he's been Baltimore this year, I think he will be moving on that following year. Isaiah Likely is in a contract year, so it's going to be a case of pay him or move him on, and they're not going to be paying both Andrews and Likely. So I think at this point, I'd take the gamble on Likely because even if he were the player to move on, he is going to be signed somewhere as their tight end 1, and we've seen what he can do when he has those targets funneled his way. This is a pick now that I am genuinely confident will reflect really good value, potentially in just a week or 2, and also gives me a route to an RB1 on their team in my RB2 slot. And once again, there's a bit of Ravens bias still sat there. I'm taking J.K. Dobbins in round 9. If in an hour it is announced that his journey to Denver has been fruitful and he is signed there, yes, he's got RJ Harvey, but Dobbins is going to get some serious work still. And he didn't have as much go in the tank last year. We saw that, but it was a year removed from quite a nasty knee injury. We see it with running backs all the time. The second year is where they really come back. And we just saw what he did last year when he got a run of the ball, when he got those, when he got enough carries to kind of keep him relevant. He converted and put big points up. So this is definitely a risk. Potentially someone I'll have there for a couple of years, but I'd hope that I could address that in my rookie drafts next year or with some trade work as well. So I'm now happy, unless J.K. Dobbins goes off and signs for somewhere where he's then the RB2 or 3, that I've got someone I can leave in my lineup, hopefully.
Yeah, I like him. I think I almost brought it up earlier when you mentioned RJ Harvey. I think you said he's been rising and seems to just continue to be rising. And I wondered whether when I saw the news about J.K. Dobbins, because he's going to sign somewhere. He had a good year last year when he was on the field. And I wondered whether that would slow it down, and it doesn't seem to have slowed it down yet. But if that gets confirmed, I wonder whether RJ Harvey will not necessarily drop as much, but will the rise will slow down a little bit, and he'll peak at where he is, because that's got to take some work away from him. But I think J.K. Dobbins is good for a good few games, especially if he signs with the Broncos.
Yeah, I think probably at this point he'll feel like a reach, but I imagine he's going to be going round 6, 7, maybe once a sign is announced. We shall see in potentially only a few days. Drake May, then Keon Coleman, Cam Ward. Once again, that's going to be interesting where he's going this time next year. Chris Godwin, Zach Charbonnet, Khalil Shakir, and then over to you again. So you've got every position allocated with your first option except for tight end. Are you going to fill the bench a bit more before you go for tight end, or have you got someone in mind?
So there's 2 tight ends I'm looking at. One, in fact, 3, because I would consider Likely as well, although I do think it's a bit more of a gamble. Likely is the sort of player I would take and have taken in Dynasty, and then as long as you back him up with someone else and you can afford to sort of sit him on the bench and see what happens with Andrews, because I think you're right. I'm not sure how much value he's got this year, but I think moving forward, he has a lot of value at tight end. So there's a few I still like. I like Njoku. I really like Evan Ingram, talking about the Broncos. So I'm okay there. If we're only doing 11 rounds, I would be comfortable with the 5 wide receivers I've probably got. So that leaves me with running back. And it kind of depends on what I wanted to do later on. I think Najee Harris is a great value. I know Amarian Hampton's there, and I've no doubt by the end of the year that he will be the running back leading the Chargers. But they're another team that just wants to run the ball, and Najee Harris, if nothing else, he doesn't get injured and he stays on the field. I don't think he's ever missed a game for the Steelers in his career. So he will be there and he will be a part of it. And I think at least to start the season while he's in Hampton, and he will be the main man. So if I wanted someone to kickstart me, I think Najee Harris is the man to go with to kick the season off. Then you're looking at players like I like Benson. I think he's got potential. We talked about Connor. I don't know how long Connor's got left in him. I also like Jordan Mason, although he's going a little bit high there. So I will go running back, and I will go Najee Harris.
Yeah, I mean, for me, looking at running back, that would be where I'd have been thinking as well when you said about Harris or Benson. They both have a route to giving some value to your team. Kraft off next, so Team 11 doubling up on tight ends. Aaron Jones for Team 12. Once again, Team 12 continue to build to win this season and deal with whatever happens the year after.
Yeah.
Kyler Murray, they've taken their backup quarterback. If I took Josh Allen in the first round, I'm not taking a quarterback until later. Obviously, we're doing just 3 bench picks, but I'm assuming we've got a full bench. I wouldn't be going for Kyler Murray there, but Team 12 is doing what Team 12 would like to do. Jet Beck going off next, and then you have your penultimate pick.
We've just going back to that with Jordan Love as your QB1. We were doing 24 rounds. How long would you wait for that in a single quarterback league? Jordan Love's going to be a plug and play. How long will you wait until you got to pick your second quarterback?
So looking at ADP, it would probably be around 12 to 14 when I picked up Dak Prescott, because Dak Prescott is going at, I think, for a backup quarterback on a dynasty startup, I think he's going at great values. He's only 31. I know he's had his injuries, but you've got a little while you can then address elsewhere. And then I'd also be looking to pick up someone for Taxi Squad as well. My other option would probably be a little bit earlier than that. And I really like picking up Bryce Young as a backup quarterback as well, because do you know, say Bryce Young comes really good this year, I've got 2 fantastic quarterbacks. If I need to repair elsewhere, I've got a fantastic value at a trade piece. So Bryce Young, if I wanted to go a little bit earlier, or I'd be comfortable waiting for Dak Prescott a little bit later as well, just for my plug-in on the bye week, or if there's a really, really good game. What about yourself? So you've got Burrow at 3. When are you thinking about a backup quarterback?
Well, I think it's one of the places where you're looking at a single quarterback league, and I'm not in many single quarterback dynasties, but we do a lot of single quarterback redraft. And I think it's one of the mistakes that people tend to make a little bit, is, well, I need a backup quarterback, and then they see other quarterbacks going off the board and they panic. And I'm like, you've just used your 10th, 11th round pick on someone that's never going to be in your. If you've got Joe Burrow or even Jordan Love, you just used your pick on. You've just wasted a pick on someone that ideally you don't want to play. Now, I appreciate you need a backup, but I just feel like there's always someone you can pick up later on. Take a gamble on a rookie. There'll be injuries, there'll be people coming in. I just think you're much better building up your running back and wide receiver room. So I think with Joe Burrow, I would be a little bit later than what you just said, maybe round 15, 16, see who's available. There's a few I like, and we'll get to some names in a minute about some really dirty gambles. But that combo you just talked about of Jordan Love and Dak Prescott, I think would be I'd be very happy if you could get him in, say, round 13 or 14.
I think Jordan Love for me is my QB8 as well. So if this was a redraft league and I'd taken Jordan Love there, anything Jordan Love or higher, I'm not taking a backup quarterback. I'm not interested whatsoever. If they get injured, I'll grab someone from the waiver wire. I'll panic then. I'd much rather stash my bench with players that could be rotated into that flex spot. But it's this way people go about, isn't it? It's what you want to do, what you want to, and how you want to be interacting with the waiver wire as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes, and you're right, it happens a little bit more in redraft, but I think sometimes people are a little bit more panicky about what might happen as opposed to going, well, just that's what the waiver wire is for. Just worry about that. Try and give yourself the best situation and worry about that when it happens. Because you might not have to find a replacement at all, and then just using a bench spot on someone that's never going to be in your team. I've already talked about this. I'm going to go tight end now because team 1 hasn't got one. And watching Team 11 take a second one, that suggests that other teams might take a second one. So I'm going to hit the go on Njoku. I think he's a really solid tight end in that position. He's not. I mean, I know he had that 5 or 6 week stretch to finish 2023 where he really won people leagues, and I'm not expecting that sort of level. But I think even no matter who the quarterback has been over the last couple of years, he's shown that he's got consistency there. So I'm quite happy to have him as my tight end.
So after that, Deebo Samuel, JJ McCarthy, Jalen McMillan, Jaden Blue. Once again, going to be a very interesting pick to see how that shapes up over the course of the season. Johnny Smith, the player that I had queued up ready to take. Trey Benson, who we mentioned earlier, because James Conner will miss time, and when he misses time, Trey Benson will step in. And we saw just enough last season to give us a bit of hope that could be really fruitful. So when I'm thinking about players I am and I'm not going to use, I'm really happy with my wide receivers at the moment. I've spoken up J.K. Dobbins, but there is also a world where what I'm hoping to happen does not happen. So I need to have a little think about what I might well do at running back. So I'm going to play that. I think I had Matt FF Dynasty on the end. He said something about, especially in this mock draft press, just pick a player that you really would like to have on there. And as part of the experiment doing the mock draft. So at this stage, to have a running back that I think could really pay back dividends for me, that is Bashal Tutin. Not just an absolute banger of a name, but a route to usurping Etienne and Bigsby in Jacksonville. I don't think he'd have been drafted if there wasn't a way seen to him to be taken over that role. So Tutin is a player that I'm happy to take a bit of a gamble on here. After that, Myers and Pittman went off the board. Kelsey and Likely follow. So at this stage, then, I've got my 3 running backs. I've got my wide receivers. I would have considered Isaiah Likely at this point, I think, had he still been on the board. I wouldn't usually go for a backup tight, especially with Trey McBride. But I think Isaiah Likely could be a useful flex play and be good value there as well. So having a look at what I have up next on my list. So, I mean, wide receiver would make sense for me. I could probably do with another running back. I'm going to go for a player that I will not get a lot out of, but I think could potentially, whilst I'm waiting for players like Golden and Higgins to come through, has a chance, if what I'm hoping happens at running back pays off, could give me a chance to be in contention. I really, really like Cooper Cup's landing spot in Seattle. And I do think that this year he will pay value absolutely at round 11. I'm going to get much more than a season or two out of him. Probably not. But it's another option that could potentially, if the wind blows right with the roster I built here, keeps me in contention with a couple of big weeks as well. Tajay Spears, Javon Jennings, Kyle Williams. Kyle Williams was another player I've been thinking at my last pick there as well, because I do like Kyle Williams in startup. I think he's got a route to being a really, really top wide receiver. Calvin Ridley, Ramondre Stevenson, Jake Ferguson, good second tight end option, especially for Team 9 if you're waiting for Tyler Warren to come through. Ferguson could get you through those first few weeks potentially. What are you going to go for your last pick, Pete?
This is where I would consider going double up on tight end. I think if I've waited 10 rounds to take my first, I've already mentioned Evan. I like Evan Ingram, always liked Evan Ingram, and I like the trade to the Broncos. I think he's going to have a big year. And the one thing that's putting me off, and I know this isn't the way you should play Dynasty, but the one thing that's putting me off is that feels like a dilemma I'm going to get wrong. That feels like a decision I'm going to have to make every week. Is it in Njoku or is it in Ingram? And I'm going to pick the wrong one with every week that passes. So that's maybe it shouldn't be putting me off. I think I like Mason Taylor as well if we're looking at tight end, and that might be a little bit more of an investment for the future, park him on the bench. But as we're in the last round and I just really want to talk about this guy, I'm going to go with Xavier Legette at wide receiver to add to my wide receiver room. We've just done a Superflex Dynasty startup with a few mates, and I made sure I got Legette in that. I've been picking him in as many best balls as I can. And quite honestly, I saw a few interviews with him and I just think the guy's great. So that's it comes back to what you said earlier in terms of sometimes it's just nice to have a guy that, you want on your roster. And don't get me wrong, I can see the potential there. We've already mentioned Bryce Young. And I would, in this build, I would try and add, Young's not gone, has he? I would try and add Bryce Young later on, maybe on the turn, or, maybe take a gamble and leave it a couple of rounds as my second quarterback to team with him, because I love a stack in every format. And I just think he's got he showed flashes in year one with uncertain quarterback play, and then Bryce Young came in, and I think they could potentially be building something at the Panthers. So I think he's a safe bet to just, as I've already got 5 wide receivers, I can stick him on the bench for a few weeks or a season and just see what I get out of him. And by the end of the year, he's on my roster because he's lighting it up. Then great.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, I'm high on Bryce Young coming this season, and I think McMillan is the key benefactor to that. But that's also a benefit to Legette if McMillan's there, drawing a bit of that coverage as well. Legette could potentially find himself a useful role. Jaylen Warren is gone in the pick draft for you for the 11-11, and we finish off with Mr. Boat Boy himself, Stephon Diggs, as the final pick of round 11. So we've mentioned a few there, players that you're looking at. A couple that you've said that will be players I would be looking at in my next few picks. Bryce Young, absolutely. At the point where he's available to me, I'd happily take him as my backup quarterback and potentially a really kind of top player for the future. Mason Taylor as well. I'm not going to need a tight end with Trey McBride there, but it's a player I'd be happy with to see how he develops. A player that maybe then by the time Trey McBride is moving over the crest of his peak performance, I've got Mason Taylor sat there as well. And you got to think about the long game with your dynasty lineup and how many rookie tight ends land in a position where they are guaranteed to be the tight end one. I don't think we're expecting that of Mason Taylor, so that definitely increased his stock. Another player I'd like to mention, we've spoken a lot about Texans wide receivers, and I think is a really useful thing to think about with your dynasty startups is the old IR stash. And Tank Dell is a player that I'm not thinking about taking anytime soon in my draft, but I would be looking for a player like Tank Dell much later in the draft, just to draft him, stick him straight on IR, or hopefully if he's buried enough down the ADP, people might forget about him. And that sort of player is always good. I did it with Cam Akers a few years ago. That didn't work out. But you're not wasting anything, are you? If you've got a player set on IR and they come back and they are anything like Tank Dell was, it's a free pick in my eyes.
I've just done the same thing with Christian Watson in the
Yep.
draft that we did. Like I'm not sure, he's due back October, November time at the earliest, I think they reckon. But in Dynasty, he's also, I don't know if his contract's up this year or he's got one more year. But it feels like I just stick him on IR and let's see how he comes back and whether they give him a contract or any of that sort of stuff. And if you have to cut him at the end, it doesn't matter because you've taken him with one of the last few picks. And I think that's the thing I've learned the most over playing Dynasty the last few years is when you get to the last few rounds of your Dynasty draft, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's 8 team, 10 team, 12 team, doesn't matter how many rounds you go. I mean, I don't play in a lot of leagues where it's a 15, 20 strong bench, but if you're not talking that sort of depth, there's always going to be players on the waiver wire that you're going to look at. There's going to be people who crop up. So you don't need to overthink the last couple of picks too much. I'm trying to go for people who might smash it and might show potential, as opposed to someone who's going to be a bit of a plodder and you're probably going to cut after 4 or 5 weeks anyway because you need to make room for somebody else. So, a couple of guys on my list. Maybe next couple of rounds, maybe a little bit. Definitely next couple of rounds. If you're looking for someone solid, I think Darnell Mooney at the Falcons is a really solid pick this year. He's been in a lot of best balls that I've been trying to get hold of. I think he's fallen a little bit lower, and I'm sure a pick that you'll like, Rashad Bateman, I think he's underrated as well. Possibly more best ball than sort of redraft or dynasty because you just never know where those games are coming. But that doesn't mean he's not going to level up at some point and show you that week in, week out he can do it. And then other players I've looked at, I think Garendo's a good value, especially for dynasty if something happens to McCaffrey. I think Roshan Johnson's worth a gamble at the Bears because you just don't know what they're going to do with that running back room. And if Swift can't do it, then Roshan Johnson could have a role there. And then another one that I think is worth mentioning at wide receiver is Roman Wilson at the Steelers. Beyond DK Metcalf, they have no real options. So I know there's all sorts of talk about them looking for someone else. And I'm sure now they'll try and trade for Jordy Nelson or someone that Aaron Rodgers has played with in the past. But I think there's a chance that he missed a lot of last season through injury. And there's a lot of those second-year players, and I've already talked about Legette. You kind of go, actually, I'd like to give you one more chance. And then if it doesn't work out, I'll cut you next year when I'm bringing a load of rookies through.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense as well. And looking at, I agree. It's those players that are they going to have the upside rather than players that you're never really gonna kind of use at any point. And the best ball, can't really say about Rashad Bateman. Rashad Bateman will absolutely have at least one game as a top 12 wide receiver this season, and probably 3 in the top 24. Same with DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins is going to have a couple of top 12 games. No idea when they'll be. They'll be spread amongst games where he's got 3 or 4 fantasy points as well. But at the value they're going in your best ball leagues, 100% worth a gamble on there, aren't they? Thinking of rookies, so a few players that I'd be looking at to fill my taxi squad. So quarterback, Jalen Milroe, absolutely is worth a stash. A 1 QB, I still think he will go towards the tail end for that exact reason. But he's a player that is definitely worth keeping an eye on. Once again, you may put him in your taxi squad, drop him in 2 years, and we never speak of him ever again. If he does make it, he will make it in a way that is very, very relevant to fantasy. If he ends up being a starter at any point for the Seahawks, if Darnold goes down, we'll be talking about Jalen Milroe on the waiver wire relentlessly in the build-up to that weekend. Another one, so with the news that Anthony Richardson is that re-aggravated that shoulder injury, with the common knowledge that Danny Dimes is one of the most frustrating quarterbacks on the planet. The rookie quarterback in Indianapolis is a massive target for me for putting on tax squads, and that is Riley Leonard, a player that I loved during the pre-draft process anyway. He's just a solid-looking quarterback with lots to develop still, absolutely. But I think it's probably a bit of the bias. I don't watch much college either, but with Notre Dame being the college team of Sky Sports, they're the team I've seen the most of last year. So he appeals to me. Harold Fanning, you're exactly right, taking Njoku about that point. But Fanning is a player that could potentially still be useful in that Browns lineup as well. And final one from me, Jarquez Hunter at the Rams. Regardless of what he's done, I'm still not completely sold that Williams is the one and only answer for the next 2 or 3 years in LA. And was a sleeper pick that Rich Cooling of Fantasy Sanctuary mentioned on our pre-draft show. And the landing spot is enough for me to stick him on a taxi squad and keep an eye on, I think.
Yeah, I think I've been a big fan of Kyron Williams, but mainly because Sean McVay seems like a big fan of Kyron Williams. And I think he just seems to, every year, he's got enough detractors that it seems to push him down in boards. And I'm like, yeah, I'll take that because I think there's a solid element. But I do think this year, the way they've talked about and some of the things that the reporters are talking about coming out of camp and OTAs, I think Hunter's got the chance to be that explosive element to that offense because Kyron Williams doesn't have that. He's not going to take off for 60 yards. Someone's going to catch him. So he's the hammer that they're going to keep bringing in, whereas I think Hunter could be a change of pace and could have that home run ability that makes him a little bit of a potential star of the future.
Yeah, and that's what you look for. You're looking for potential star is plenty enough to stick someone on that taxi squad. So our teams then, I have quarterback Jordan Love, and then wide receiver Malik Neighbors, Garrett Wilson, Zay Flowers, Matthew Golden, Jane Higgins, and Cooper Kupp. Tight end Trey McBride, and no backup currently waiting for me. And then running back Caleb Johnson, J.K. Dobbins, Bashal Tootin. It's safe to say running back is where my team is going to suffer a little bit, but I'm happy with the strength elsewhere, so that'll do me. You have Joe Burrow as your quarterback, wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr., Nico Collins, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle, Jaden Reed, and Xavier Legette. Derrick Henry, Brian Robinson, and Najee Harris at running back, and David Njoku at tight end. If I'm completely honest, I think I prefer your team, Pete, out of the two of ours.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate that.
It doesn't look as stressful at running back for me.
I think what I like about what you've done in terms of Dynasty is you've got, 4 rookies in there? 4 rookies in there and a bit of a gamble with Dobbins. So you've gambled a little bit more than I have. I think I've played a little bit safer. The Najee Harris, Brian Robinson picks are a little bit safer. Not necessarily going to set the world on fire. Whereas you've gone a little bit more, this could really work out, or I could be picking quite high up in the draft next year. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with that team. I'd be happy to go into a season with that. If I could have a few more pieces, a couple of gambles at running back, a backup quarterback that I was happy with. I think that's a decent roster.
Well, thank you very much for joining me, Pete. Really appreciate having a little bit of draft and chatting some fantasy football as well. Where can people find you and the rest of the JMD team if they wish to come and find you?
We are on all the socials at JMD Pod. So hit us up on there. Like I say, follow us on YouTube. We have a new show coming out this week. We are starting to talk Bestball this week. So we're going to talk about some of our key picks. There'll be a bit of chat. We've not done a pod for a few weeks, so there'll be a bit of chat. I'm sure the Steelers will come up because they come up in most, with Ian being a Bengals fan and the Steelers being a bit of a circus at the moment. They come up in most pods that we do. So give that a listen, and like I say, if you like it, follow us on your favorite podcast station.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Pete. I think we've got you on to do one of our deep dive shows soon. In fact, if I remember rightly, I think we've got Ian on next week as well. A couple of weeks, sorry, and I'm not sure if he'd put you down as well. So we may well see you soon to do another show. But that is all for now. We have spoken all we can about our Dynasty Startup Mock Draft. So, without further ado, Malcolm, take us home.
You have been listening to Pestle and Ed of TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Instagram and Twitter.